Welcome everyone to this virtual seminar of the International Society for the Study of Early Medieval England. My name is Thijs Pork. I'm the current president of the Society, and we're using these virtual seminars to showcase all of the interesting research that is going on in our field. And we're very lucky this year that we've been able to collaborate with various societies and interesting research projects. And today we're very honored to co-organize this seminar with the Runes project, or the Runes database project, runic writing in the Germanic languages. And we're even more honored to have with us Professor Gaby Waxenberger, who is a professor at the University of Munich, as well as the Lower Saxonian Academy of Science and Humanities. She is an expert on Old Frisian, Old English, pre-Old English runes, and as well as Old English. And she's working on a critical edition of pre-Old English runic inscriptions. And I think her paper today is related to that project. And she'll be talking about a fascinating inscription, the skanomodu inscription. But before she gets going, she will also introduce to us the Runes project and the Runes database for those of us that are not familiar with that fascinating project just yet. So Gaby, the virtual floor is all yours. Thank you very much for being here and for sharing your research and the project.
Nice. Thank you very much for your lovely introduction. And I'm also very honored and very happy to be here. So I would like to start out with a very short introduction to runes. And then afterwards, a very lengthy talk on the skanomodu solidus. Okay, so runes, as it stands for runic writing in the Germanic languages. Now, so this is the German title, a little longer. And the whole thing is under the umbrella of, as you already said, the Lower Saxonian Academy of the Sciences and Humanities in Göttingen. And it is funded by the Union of the German Academies. Runes is actually an interdisciplinary project with 3 different philologies. 4 different languages and language stages are involved. First of all, Scandinavian as a whole, English and Frisian, and lastly, German. And we have 3 research units. Number 1 is Kiel, of course. And they are dealing with the early inscription in early runic. That means 200 to 700. And then, of course, also with the later inscriptions and the Viking Age, and going on until the Middle Ages, the late Middle Ages, I should add. Then there's Göttingen. And they already have published their edition on the inscriptions from south of Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And these are approximately from 500 to 700 and are written in pre-Old High German. And then there's Eichstätt Munich. And we basically have been dealing with inscriptions from England in pre-Old English and in Old English, and also with the fascinating inscriptions from Frisia. In a couple of them are in pre-Old Frisian and early, what I call early runic Old Frisian. What is the aim? The major aims of this Academy project Runes is, number 1, all the runic inscriptions in the Germanic world are made available in the Runes database. This is the database, and what is new now is that you can see the graph types, and you can, go into it and look at them and look at all the details. So this is new now. Oh, sorry, and then I left out the editions, of course. At the moment, as you've already said, thank you. I've been working on the pre-Old English edition, which is very, very difficult, I have to admit. And then we are also into graphemics. That means a detailed analysis of the relation between rune and sound and its changes, of course. So these are basically the major aims. So thank you very much for that very short first part. And now I would like to move on to I have to say that a great many research articles have been written on the skanomodu solidus. Today, I will only stick to the approaches summed up here according to their hypothesis and the number of articles that is all reduced to more or less very recent ones. Otherwise, we would be sitting here tomorrow morning. The skanomodu solidus inscription is caught between the two worlds. And that is the pre-Old English and the pre-Old Frisian. Today, researchers tend to assign the inscription to the Frisian runic corpus. But there is one new approach with a new argument for pre-Old English. Before I can start, I would like to give a brief comment on the date of the pre-Old Frisian and pre-Old English. This is what you've already seen. So from a runological and linguistic point of view, the periods pre-Old Frisian and pre-Old English define the period of phonological development, such as, for us today, very important, the monophthongization of Germanic I to Old English long A, Germanic Au to Old English Er, and in green, Germanic Au to Old Frisian long A. I mean, there were also other changes, of course, and for examples, changes in the root vowels brought about by umlaut, but this is not so important today. These phonological changes also caused the changes in the common Germanic rune row, developed into the Old English rune row, namely the Old English Futhorc of 27 characters by 650. So here we have the common Germanic of 24, and in the middle you can see all the pre-Old English innovations, and then at around 650 we have a rune row in England of approximately 27 characters. So the pre-Old English innovations for us today, very important is the rune A. Rune A denotes here long A. In pre-Old English, this A came about by monophthongization of Germanic I. However, in Frisian, it was developed from the Germanic diphthong Au. Regarding the skanomodu solidus, there are three major questions. First, is the skanomodu solidus inscription pre-Old English or pre-Old Frisian? In this context, the rune A plays an important role. Number two, how can the unexpected ending U in skanomodu be explained? The final U should have been lost after a long syllable at the end, at the beginning of the 7th century. And number three, skanomodu has been regarded as a name. The question now is it a male or a female name? And in this context, the final U plays an important role. I would like to turn to the object itself. It is a gold solidus weighing 4.35 gram with an estimated gold content of 89.3%. That's a lot. And a diameter of 20 millimeters. So it is not small. Originally, a solidus was an ancient Roman gold coin introduced by Constantine in the 4th century. The object is usually described as a copy of an issue of the late 4th or early 5th century Emperor Honorius, with an obverse on the left giving the imperial bust and a reverse on the right of the emperor holding the standard and the victoriola and trampling upon a captive. I don't know about trampling, but at least lifting his leg. So regarding this inscription, page states that the legend of the original have not survived on this copy, but have degenerated into meaningless letter-like groups. And this is very true. The exception is the reverse, and that in blue, where the part of it is replaced by the runic inscription skanomodu. Now, the dating, and this is numismatic dating, is as follows. Grierson and Blackburn grouped the skanomodu solidus together with other coin-like objects dating it to the late 6th century. And they consider it an early English product intended for ornamental use. Its fineness lets Blackburn suggest the production date before 610, and he regards the last quarter of the 6th century as the most likely date. So we have a period from approximately 575 to 600 or even 610 or 69. So what are the criteria for ascribing an inscription to a certain corpus? Well, basically in runology, an inscription is ascribed to a certain corpus such as Old English, Old Frisian. There you can see our Old English corpus, that is to say the fine spots. And the pre-Old English corpus has 17 inscriptions. So this is tiny. And the Old English corpus has approximately 110. So all in all, it's 125 or so. And the Frisian corpus, you can see the fine spots on the right-hand side. It's approximately 20 inscriptions. And we also have the South Germanic. This is 135 inscriptions. So a little bigger. So, as I said, in runology, an inscription is inscribed on the grounds of basically 3 criteria. Then the first one is its fine spot. The second, its linguistic features such as phonology and or morphology. And number 3, archaeological criteria. In the case of the skanomodu inscription, the verdict is not guilty on all accounts. Fine spot? There is none, because the skanomodu solidus turned up in 1825 when the British Museum received it from the royal collection of George III. And we need to remember that George III was from the House of Hanover, so that skanomodu solidus may be a continental production, maybe. So, the find history also makes number 3, archaeological criteria, null and void. So we are left with the linguistic features such as phonology and morphology. And I have to say that this is also very puzzling. So I would like to move on with the sequence, skanomodu. It has been segmented into scan and then O as a linking vowel, then mood and the ending U. Reflecting scan with a long A, also mood with a long O. I should add that runic writing does not differentiate between long and short vowels. So you have to basically reconstruct and a long A and a long O. This is the only possibility that makes sense. Ray Page, in his introduction to runes, gives in 1973, in his first edition, he gives a summary on the skanomodu solidus. Quote, "It is early in date, apparently 6th century, but its source is unknown and maybe Frisia, though runologists have commonly treated it as Anglo-Saxon, one should say Old English." In his second edition, in 1999, he gives a modified summary, and I quote, "From the royal collection of George III, the British Museum received a struck gold solidus with the legend skanomodu. It is quite early in date, possibly before approximately 610, but its provenance is unknown. So is its purpose, possibly a coin, possibly a medal or ornament. Indeed, it once had a loop for suspension. It could be Frisian, but it could perhaps be English. In order to find out if the inscription is pre-Old English or pre-Old Frisian, we need to ask which linguistic criteria speak for Frisia as the provenance of the inscription. Well, there are two linguistic features favoring Frisia as the area of origin are, number one, the famous Germanic au, developing to Old Frisian long a, contrasting with Old English or pre-Old English in the first element, that means skano. And number two, the unstressed vowel u in modu. And funnily enough, the unstressed u should actually have been developed from a Germanic as. So these are our two criteria, basically. I would also like to point out that the inscription has been seen as Old Frisian by some researchers. Others have at least taken Frisian origin into account. And this is my little list, but this is only a tiny part of a list that would be very long. So I would say, let's start with mode, because this is semantically pretty straightforward. But that's about it, I have to add. Most interpretations identify modu in the sense of mind, spirit, with a thematic stem, moda. And that would be an Old English neuter noun, mode, an Old Frisian masculine and neuter noun, an Old Saxon masculine, an Old High German mut. Mut would also be a neuter and a masculine noun. So the noun mode, meaning mind, spirit, seems unproblematic, but its ending u is, in fact, extremely challenging for runologists and historical linguists. Viewing skanomodu as a nominative singular and therefore as a name of the owner is widely favored. The great problem here is the u. At the date of the skanomodu solidus at approximately 575 to 610, the noun is the A stem masculine or neuter, meaning Germanic modas or mudan. And this actually should have been already endingless. So we should have a form mode. Now, it should be pointed out that the skanomodu ending u is not a solitary case in the Frisian corpus. According to Nedema, 6 inscriptions unambiguously considered to be Frisian end in this u in the nominative accusative singular. And both, it happens after a heavy root syllable and in the third syllable. So here is my little list. And this is only 5 inscriptions because the 6th is the skanomodu. So, and this is that little list is in chronological order. So we have basically 3 names. That is on the Schweindorf solidus, Veladu, on the Folkestone premises, Any Wulavu, and number 4, Westeremden weaving sword, Adi Gislu. Number 3 and number 5 are words for comb with an ending u. And they, I would like to point out that they are already pretty late. And they still retain or show the u in the 8th or 9th centuries. This is very unusual. So, ideally, a solution for the skanomodu solidus should also explain these 5 other cases. So let's go back to skanomodu. In search for an explanation for u, various suggestions have been made. A favorite candidate is the u stem. On the one hand, it has been assumed that the a stems borrowed cases from the u stems. On the other hand, the coexistence of an u stem with an a stem, moda, has been also assumed. And that brings me to the first suggestion that has been made, and that is U as an instrumental introduced to the A stems from the U stems. So we would have a development of pre-Old English or pre-Old Frisian U from the West Germanic long U from Germanic O. This is absolutely straightforward, but the instrumental of the A stems would actually be Old Frisian A or Old English E or A. So what would the interpretation of this be? So in this case, the inscription would mean by means of or with the skanomodu, and then you'd have to add solidus or coin. So that is suggestion number 1. So the final U again should have been lost after a long syllable, but it is quite conceivable for Baumesberger that the U was kept or maybe reintroduced after the pattern set by short syllable stems. So we have in Old English, we have flowed, that's a long stem, but we have sunu, where the U is kept after a short syllable. Nedoma regards this suggestion of the U as an instrumental marker as an ad hoc assumption, as no such attestations have been found. Well, that brings me to suggestion number 2, and that is, however, the ending U cannot be the ending of the A stems. So according to Baumesberger, the original ending would have been the A, which would have been lost in Germanic, and therefore, this is about the vocative. I think I skipped a couple of things here. No, this is the vocative. And the vocative, again, could be an ending U, but again, not from the U stems, but borrowed from the A stems, because the original ending would have been Indo-European A, which would have been lost in Germanic, and therefore the vocative would have been mode, endingless. So Baumesberger states that modu need not represent the vocative of a thematic stem, so it must come from somewhere else. So in this case, the inscription would contain the name of the person in the way in which a person in question should be addressed. I think I have a little problem with my transparencies here. So Baumesberger states that even the support for modu as an U stem is not strong. There is at least one further form of U which may well belong to the inherited U stems. And this is one of our little list, namely Weladu on the Schweindorf solidus. So Baumesberger interprets this as a personal name, Wayland, but admits that this is by no means absolutely certain. For him, it may etymologically be connected with the Norse name Völunder, and that would be an U stem. And it is therefore thinkable that the vocative in U spread from some not immediately clear source, for example, from the U stem sunu. Sunu was a prominent U stem from which a vocative ending in U may have been in use at all stages of the language development. And he thinks it quite possible that sunu led to further use of U as a vocative marker, even where it was not regularly expected. Now I would like to move on to suggestion number 3. But in this case, skanomodu would be interpreted as the name of the owner. So the interpretation of U as a nominative singular would require U as a basis. However, again, the ending U, Germanic U's of the nominative singular marker would have been lost after a long syllable. We always have to keep this in mind, but it depends on the dating as well. So the widespread view that the forms with U come from a period before the apocope of final U following a long syllable is hardly persuasive for Bommersberger. I have to add, for skanomodu, this would be possible, but not for the 8th or 9th century Frisian inscriptions, the words for comb. So it is also not plausible for him to assume that the nominative in u of short syllable stems spread to the long syllable, because for him, and that's clear, Old English clearly kept the opposition. We have sunu, but we have in the long stems an endingless, for example, hand. Additionally, an u stem modu must have existed alongside an a stem, Germanic moda. But the linguistic evidence for this is, however, not very strong according to Bommersberger. And in Niederma's opinion, there is no evidence for an u stem in the Germanic languages. Again, the gender of mood in the Germanic languages is either neuter or masculine. So an a stem. After discussing these possibilities, Bommersberger concludes that the form modu can certainly be accounted for within the linguistic system of a West Germanic language, but hardly yields any direct information as far as the underlying dialect. That means Old English or Old Frisian, in our case, it should be pre-Old English or pre-Old Frisian, is concerned. So our question number 1, is the skanomodu solidus inscription pre-Old English or pre-Old Frisian, has not been answered, not yet. Therefore, I would like to turn to a different view, namely, u as a nominative singular of a feminine o stem. And Nielsen is inclined to interpret the ending u as a nominative singular of a feminine o stem noun which is compatible with a feminine ending u. And as you can see, this is a straightforward and absolutely correct development. So although phonologically possible, this gender is confirmed neither by Old English, nor by Old Saxon, nor by Old High German, nor by Old Frisian. So we have a little problem here. Although Niederma has no objection to the interpretation of u as a nominative singular, or he even says could also be the dative singular, but I'll say something about that later, of a feminine, not just an o stem, but it could also be an eo stem. And the development is clear. But he does not consider it to be plausible because there is no possibility of comparison. That means we have no feminine mood. And also because other examples documented in the Frisian corpus, and that is Hada, and also the ones I've already showed to you, Veladu and Eniwulufu, do not represent female names. As a last possibility that has been discussed in the literature, I would like to introduce you to u as a reflex of a from us. Nielsen thinks it odd to interpret u in skanomodu as an a stem nominative singular masculine ending from us, since all suffixes in the nominative singular masculine a stems were consistently dropped in West Germanic languages, so it should be ending less. So u as a reflex of a. Nielsen follows Krause's explanation of u, and that would be that it may be the ultimate stage of vowel reduction, meaning a schwa. And therefore, this schwa, this u schwa, is a further stage of reduction in these inscriptions than ash. So that would be the ultimate reduction. Niederma also interprets the grapheme u in skanomodu, and the basis is modas, as a schwa from an u developed from Germanic az. Sorry. The rune in the end, the rune u in the ending u indicates a reduction in quality in weak positions, in Nedummer's opinion, and he defines its weak vowel as a close central vowel, a sort of a schwa or a schwa, which is higher than the mid-central vowel schwa that we know, and that's usually represented by the rune E. So, these suggestions, coming from various cases of the U stems, would explain the U. However, this U is not organic, but based on the hypothesis of borrowing an ending from the class of U stems into the class of A stems. The only organic U, ending U in the nominative singular and possibly in the dative belongs to the feminine O or EO stems. And now we'll leave it here for the time being, and I would like to go on with skan. The element skan. Page points out that this element is more frequent in continental Germanic names. And Nedummer lists a West Frankish name of a Munir, Skaunarius. For Beck, the name Schönmut, meaning beautiful mind, is conceivable. Again, the basis is skanomodas, although it cannot be verified. He also points out the possibility of an appellative mood in the Old High German Übermut, meaning pride, haughtiness, or arrogance. And he concludes, whatever the exact meaning of skano was, it must have positively modified the main word. And Baumesberger assumes that skanomodu is a Bahuvi compound with an adjectival stem skano, and the second part modu. Since mod can be brought together with the nominal stem Germanic muda, meaning a neuter in Old English, skanomodu may have meant having a skano mind. That brings me to the phonology and the morphology of skan. It has been the opinion communis that skan cannot readily be viewed as Old English because Germanic skaun would have developed to Old English shan. And this can be seen in names, for example, the late Shanwolf. So, skan has been seen as fully in agreement with the Frisian phonology. But Fenneman offers an alternative etymology for skan. He links it to the Germanic skein, meaning shine, opening up the possibility of the long a developed from Germanic I, being pre-Old English in this case. Fenneman explains Germanic skein as the ablauded base derived from the class 1, strong verb, Germanic skinan, Old English shian, meaning to shine. He rightly points out that the monophthongization of Germanic I into the long a occurred both in Old English and Frisian. Therefore, reconstructing skainomod, having a shining mind or visible or brilliant courage, on the traditional model, namely skaun o mod, having a beautiful mind, would thus seem to make the exclusive assignment of the skanomodu inscription to the Frisian corpus questionable. Skein to skan in the given context being the regular development both in Old English and in Frisian. Fenneman's skein is an adjective which should be derived from the root forms of strong verbs. However, forms derived from roots of ablaut classes 4 and 5 usually have lengthened grade. Forms derived from diphthongal roots, 0 grade. Fenneman states, and I quote, hence for the class 1 verb shinan to appear shine, an I stem adjective, would most likely be based on a 0 grade root from skin, rather than on a full grade, meaning skan from skein. But Feneman follows Meilhammer, who has shown that, and I quote, any ablaut rate can occur in all kinds of nominal stem formation, especially when it's based on strong verbs, so that an E stem based on an A grade base of a strong verb is absolutely natural. Feneman also quotes Bommersberger, who writes, alongside the dominant 0 grade, verbal roots of classes 1 to 4 not infrequently also show the O grade before the E suffix. Although there is no example of this in Bommersberger, 1990, Feneman considers it a mistake to infer from this that this type of formation was less probable because of the lack of attestation does not really prove anything. So Feneman arrives at the conclusion that the derivation of skano from the adjectival base skine of skiny, shining, is formally and semantically no less plausible than the traditional derivation from an adjectival base, meaning scown of scowny, beautiful. This brings me now to my third problem area in the inscription, and this is the O in skano. Various attempts to explain this O have been undertaken depending on the underlying adjectival ending. According to Bommersberger, the vowel underlying O in skano, if developed from skauna, can only be a. Explaining this O from Germanic a in skano, Bommersberger considers the process of rounding medial a in labial surroundings. So it was followed by M, and that's a labial surrounding. It is also emphasized by Bommersberger that there is no attestation of an adjectival stem skauna in the individual Germanic languages. So according to Bommersberger and Needleman, Old English eumlaudit sine, beautiful, points to a preform skaunia, indicating an ia stem. Bommersberger sees two ways to account for skauna as the first element of the compound. Skaunia, the form best attested, could have been replaced by skauna in the first element of a compound. And the most plausible way is, in my eyes, this. As a parallel, Bommersberger lists the names of the type Ethelbert, Ethelred, and so on, whose first element is to be identified with the adjectival stem evele, noble. Whereas the adjectival stem goes back to Germanic adalia, the compounds reveal a thematic stem adala. According to Bommersberger, it may be assumed that the adjectival stem skaunia could appear as skauna in the first element of the compound. So now I would like to present a short summary of the linguistic approach so far. We can see and say the following. Number one, skanomodu is most likely a personal name or possibly a byname. Mod has been seen as the noun mod, mind, spirit. As such, it is an A stem, either masculine or neuter, derived from the Germanic moda or modan. So, number three, in this case, U is a problem and needs to be explained, either as an instrumental or vocative, taken from the U stems, or perhaps U denotes the nominative singular of an U stem. In the latter case, the existence of an U stem alongside an A stem must be assumed for modu, although there is a lack of attested forms for an U stem. Number four, modu has also been seen as a feminine O stem or possibly EO stem. In this case, modu could represent the nominative singular or, according to Needleman, possibly the dative singular. This assumption is formally possible, but there is no attestation of a feminine name according to Nedema. So if the underlying language is pre-Old English, I would like to point out that the dative singular would end in ash. So again, we have to borrow this from the instrumental, which would be possible. Number 5, the first element skan has been regarded as derived from Germanic skaun, because au developed to pre-Old Frisian a, whereas in Old English Germanic au developed to er. Number 6, Fenneman and the pre-Old English skein. Contrary to his predecessors, Fenneman made an attempt to derive skan from skein in pre-Old English. The verb would be the strong verb class 1, shinan, to shine. The expected underlying form would be an ISSEME adjective, most likely based on the 0 grade root skin rather than on the full grade skan. However, an ISSEME adjective derived from a grade base of a strong verb skan is possible, according to Meilhammer. Number 7, the provenance of the inscription. Regarding the provenance of the inscription, Waxenberger states that practically nothing seems ascertainable. He concludes that if skanomodu is seen as derived from Germanic skaunamoda, the vowel a would seem to point to Frisian phonology, although it must be stressed that we are far from certain in this respect. But the balance of probability certainly indicates that the bearer of the name skanomodu was Frisian. In his conclusion, Fenneman states the other argument commonly proposed in favor of the Frisian origin of the inscription, namely the ending u, derives from a masculine nominative singular astem ending as, has met with reservation in the literature where the interpretation of a feminine dative singular ostem termination has been suggested instead. Even though tracing this ending in the historical grammar of English is not a straightforward matter, as I said, it must be explained with the instrumental. A feminine dative on the piece of jewelry seems to me, that is Fenneman, a priori more probable for pragmatic reasons than a masculine nominative. And as I said, the dative singular in pre-Old English would be an ash, but it can be explained from the instrumental. Fenneman concludes, taking all aspects of the skanomodu solidus into account, he proposes that its runic inscription reflects a personal ostem name in the dative, namely skynamod, meaning for skynamod, as an alternative to skaunamod for skaunamod, and also to the reconstructions deriving the final u from us. And Fenneman concludes further that the likelihood of the inscriptions being Old English is at least as great as that of being Old Frisian. And that brings me to the question, which text type is represented in skanomodu, in the inscription? Well, Nedema views the object as a coin or a piece of jewelry, maybe an amulet. For him, the text type is either the Mania or Ona inscription. He regards a donor or rune master inscription as less probable. In the case of a rune master inscription, the name can only be in the nominative. Well, this is also the best option for a mania or a ruler, meaning an issuer of the coin. If the inscription is an Ona inscription, a nominative is also expected. In the case of a donor inscription, the receiver occurs in the dative. Well, the text type does actually not help in finding out the provenance, because the text type depends on the etymology of skanomodu given by a researcher in question. But don't give up hope. There is still one more criterion that has not yet been discussed, and this is graphemics. And it is actually the shape of the rune A. And rune A has three major allograph types in the pre-Old English runes corpus. For our purposes, one can forget about the third type because it is too late for us. So type number 3 can be deleted. Now that leaves us with type 1. And type 1 is the chevron type because the upper side twig has the form of a chevron. And then we have type number 2. And there we have type number 2A and type number 2B. Type number 2A, the ascender of the upper side twig starts from the end of the upper side twig. And then we have type 2B, and this is the Frisian type. And here the ascender does not start from the end of the upper side twig, but approximately from 1/3 of the way along it. And this type has been considered to be typical for Old Frisian and pre-Old Frisian. And you can see this here. This is a Frisian inscription. It's the so-called Southampton bone. And but this is already runic. It's not pre-Old Frisian. So what can we say about this? I think we should look at the skanomodu art. The red area is the rim of the coin. So let's have a look what we've got here. We have got, and this is my conclusion now, the skanomodu A is clearly not the Frisian type, but it is the most common type, type A, type 1, used in both England and Frisia. Now, the conclusion, although graphemics does not disambiguate the inscription's provenance either, on the contrary, it leaves the two possibilities, namely English or Frisian, open. The object and its possible function. That may help us. According to Page, its function is uncertain, but he thinks it unlikely that it was intended as currency despite its appropriate weight for a solidus, because it would be too heavy for most commercial uses in the late 6th and early 7th century. More importantly, Page points out that the object once had a loop to enable it to be worn as a pendant or brooch, suggesting that it was a copy of a Roman coin converted into a piece of jewelry. If it was a piece of jewelry, a female name may also be considered. If so, possible text types are an owner inscriptions in the nominative and a donor inscription in the dative. A donor inscription is only conceivable if the instrumental ending "u" is taken for the dative, because the pre-Old English and also pre-Old Frisian ending would be an ash. So Nederma derives "u" in the dative from the instrumental, and there it is straightforward. This is absolutely wonderful. For the EO stems, the instrumental Germanic O is at least recorded in Old High German Gebu, according to Baumesberger. So here comes my final conclusion. If it is a female name, the problematic "u" can be explained for both text types listed above, the owner and also the donor inscription. In this case, the approach presented by Nielsen and Fenneman would be possible. But back to Nederma's doubts, which I presented earlier, his objection to the interpretation of "u" as a nominative singular or possibly also dative singular of a feminine EO stem is that there is no possibility of comparison, and second, because other attestations with "u" in the Frisian corpus, such as Hada and Weladu and any Wolavu, do not present female names. Clearly, this interpretation of skanomodu does not solve the problems of the other inscriptions ending in U. That is sad. But while it is plausible, I think, to posit a vocative ending for the name Weladu, and possibly for any Wulavu and Habaku, the U in the words for comb, Kabu and Kubu, may represent the instrumental meaning by means of the comb. May. I therefore suggested in 2017 that the ending U in the Frisian corpus does not go back to one source, but to two. In some cases to the vocative and in others to the instrumental. And I still think that the U goes back to more sources. Maybe not to the vocative and maybe not to the instrumental, but to more sources. Therefore, a new and more detailed interdisciplinary study must be carried out to explain U for the other inscriptions. Nevertheless, to me, a female name seems to be the best solution of all possibilities discussed as a major obstacle, namely the U ending can be explained morphologically and also phonologically, as the apocope of U after long syllables happened at the beginning of the 7th century, according to Ludwig. As the numismatic dating of the skanomodu solidus is 575 to 600 and maybe 10 or maybe 9, at this time the U should still have been there, possibly already weakened to some kind of schwa. But that doesn't matter because the representation by the U would be normal. As far as skan is concerned, it may be Pre-Old Frisian or Pre-Old English. Therefore, the inscription will have a lengthy entry in my critical edition of the Pre-Old English inscriptions. And thank you very, very much for your attention, also for your patience with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaby, for an excellent paper. Just 9 letters, but so many interesting things to be said about that one inscription.